We are back. So hello everybody and welcome to Lecture 4. Lecture 4 is going to be based literally right where we left off, and it's all about personalities in conflict. So in the last lecture, for the people who didn't watch it, I explained that within you and within the Wayne universe, there's a group of personalities, and every single one of these personalities obviously makes up the entire world. And because of the limits in storytelling, because of the inability to get inside of Bruce's conscience, we actually use these ideas, we use these people, we use these personalities to really simulate what Bruce is thinking. And every argument that Bruce has is the argument between Bruce's ego, right, the way that he actually perceives the world, and all of these little sub-personalities that exist within him. So now we have the perfect understanding of, okay, what are these personalities? That was the last lecture. Just trying to figure out, okay, what do each of these personalities represent? Now we must figure out, okay, what is it that happens when these actually start to go against each other? There's we'll say, popular idea of the devil versus the angel, and that's sort of like the perfect understanding of it. The fact that we have a devil and we have an angel, and both of these personalities exist within us, and they're gonna have to fight to take control of our ego, which is our, in this case, Bruce, right? The person who actually has all the power, who actually can have an influence on the world. And well, that's us, right? Because we're the ones who could actually have an influence. Imagine if you have a conscience that exists within you, or at least, we'll say the angel. You have an angel that exists within you, but you never listen to it. Well, that angel is just a personality that exists within you that is never actually expressed, and it doesn't have any influence on the world. So, well, Jordan Peterson, what he talks about in his lectures is, he says whenever there is he talks about, the structure of our brain. He says if you take essentially like the bottom 5%, essentially like the most primitive parts, the basic parts, which make our lungs function, our heartbeat, our blood go throughout our body, and at the same time, can regulate us eating food and drinking water and things like that, and just our basic survival functions. If you have those, just that bottom 5% of our brain, we could essentially function relatively well. As in, yeah, we could eat, drink, sleep, all those things, have sex, especially for women. Now, it's a little bit more complicated for men, but he says the next 95% of our brain, the higher level parts of our brain, are literally, or we'll say mostly, designed to handle these personalities in conflict. Because what happens when you have this desire to eat, but you also have this desire to, form a relationship, right? Like, oh, should I sit down on the couch and eat for an hour, or should I spend time with my spouse, or should I spend time with my family, with my friends? We have these personalities that are in debate. It's the debate between the person who wants to be super lazy and the person that wants to have a meaningful relationship. And when these personalities come in conflict, that's the 95%. So that's exactly what we're going to try to figure out in this. What happens when our personalities come in conflict, and, well, how do you solve it, right? Because you're going to have these problems in your life. Almost every single decision that you have to make, this is a great way of thinking about it. Every single decision that you have to make is a decision between two personalities, whatever they may be. So, for example, if you're saying, let's see, should I spend time watching a movie, or should I spend time, or should I spend time in school, right, or doing homework, right? That debate right there is the debate between the conscientious side of you, the person that wants to do well in school and have a good career and all these things, and the person that wants to watch a movie is, well, it depends what you get out of the movie, but we'll say it's the desire for awe, right? Sublimity, to be awestruck. So, there are two personalities that are within you, and you literally have to have a debate between the two to see which one arises, and that's what happens in Bruce Wayne here. So Bruce Wayne, you see, it sort of starts out in, his appearance to the world starts out with him holding two women, right? Essentially showing himself off as I'm going to use an Iron Man quote, the billionaire playboy philanthropist, right? He's literally the stupid, carefree, we'll say billionaire who seems like a trust fund baby, who seems really spoiled, and obviously gets whatever he wants because he's spoiled. And well, I like the idea that Bruce Wayne in this movie is two people, right? He's Bruce Wayne and he's Batman, and you could see that his ego is sort of split, right? It's like, okay, he's asking himself the question, should I be Batman or should I be Bruce Wayne? And, well, he likes being Batman, but he also likes being Bruce Wayne, and each of them carry a distinct personality. So right now, I mean, you could tell as he walks in, Christian Bale, he does a great job with body language, so you'll see sort of as we go along. He seems like he's actually enjoying it, right? This is something that, well, you could say he actually likes. Like who wouldn't like having, being essentially the James Bond character? Like it's really a great gig, and well, here's another great representation as you could see him. So he. What he does when he's here is, how at like restaurants, you can think of this as like a Chinese restaurant, but also like fancy restaurants. They have the little pond, like the little like pool of water for decoration. He goes swimming in it, and then, and obviously, it's just a complete. It's the thing that the dumb trust fund baby would do. And if you look at his face right over here, he looks like the kind of guy that you just kind of want to slap him in the face. Right, just had to kind of like slap him and say, "Wake up!" Because to some degree, this person that he's this part that he's playing, this personality that he's exhibiting, really does need to wake up. And I think it's really funny because I think often we have these sort of debates within ourselves, and we sort of look like this. I find that sometimes I look like this whenever I sort of do dumb things, we'll say. And you could say that right now he's having a debate between, okay, should I be Bruce or should I be Batman? Should I be trust fund baby or should I be the hero? And when you combine the two together, that is hopefully the goal. Hopefully the goal is that eventually you could integrate the two personalities, because you imagine this world is full of like 1,000 different personalities, and you can't just only represent one of them. You need to integrate your conscience as well as your well, maybe you could even say, I might even be so radical to say, maybe you integrate a little part of your devil within you. Just like, well, that's Fight Club, right? The movie Fight Club is like, these two people, or at least this guy, right, is so bogged down by the culture that says, okay, you need to live in this polite society, fold your hands, and be incredibly, we'll say non-aggressive, right? But well, men are aggressive, right? Men have this innate desire, this innate personality that exists within them to, we'll say, fight, but that doesn't mean in a physical sense. Maybe just to be aggressive, to be disagreeable, and not to just bow down to, we'll say, a superior, which this superior could be like society, culture, a person, or anything else. So maybe that aggression, which is typically seen as something devilish, maybe it could be integrated into society, into ourselves, and that's exactly what Batman does if we really think about it. He's a creature of the night. He takes down criminals and he fights them. It's not like he just like throws a stuffed animal at them or something. He does things that some would consider reprehensible, some would consider devilish, some would consider primitive, and well, he integrates that and uses it for good, and that's maybe the perfect archetype for understanding integrating all the personalities. So you could see, right now he's having a debate right now, and this is the personality in conflict. Should I be Trust Fund Baby or should I be Batman? And how can I integrate the two? And well, I'm going to give a little spoiler here. In The Dark Knight, there's this great scene where I find that like he does it, like finally he's able to do it, and yeah, it takes all the way up until The Dark Knight. But you could see here, he's Bruce Wayne. Obviously, he's in the persona of Bruce Wayne, and he literally gets his champagne glass and walks over to the side and dumps it out over the balcony. And by doing that, it shows that he has completely disregarded and gotten rid of the life of Bruce Wayne, right? Like even though he still hosts parties and does things like that, he's not going to be a part of it. And well, that's how the personality, one of the two personalities went into conflict, and one of the personalities won. So let's get back to Batman Begins, where he meets this Anima, right? He meets this Anima figure, and well, the Enema is the feminine figure, right? And what happens is she says, first of all, she sees him looking like this, right? She sees him looking completely dumb, right, we'll say. And she says, it's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. And she says that whenever he says, hey, listen, I could be good, right? I could be the hero, but, I'm just not acting like it. And, well, I think that's a profound idea. I think that's really a profound idea because, well, let's put it this way. Almost every single one of the debates that you have is this debate right here. It's the person that you want to be, right? So Batman or Bruce Wayne is saying, I could be good, right? I have this good intentions inside of me, but at the same time, I'm not acting it out, right? And we have this debate within ourselves every single day. I know I do, right? It's a debate between the person I am now and the person that I want to be. And, well, think of it this way. Every single time that you set a goal, right, a personal goal, right, let's say, we'll just go with the simple example, I want to go to the gym, right? When you say I want to go to the gym, you're making the implicit statement that you would be better if you went to the gym, right? Like your life would be better and you would be a better person if you went to the gym, roughly speaking. And obviously it's true, right? And to that degree, you have to say that you are not the person that you are now is not the person that you could be, because you could be better, right? And I think that's why so many people really don't go to the gym and don't even start in making the change, because they would have to admit to themselves that they're inadequate, which, well, that takes a little dropping of the ego, let's say, and that's not easy, right? It's really, really not easy. And well, that's the archetype right there. The archetype of I want to be better, but I'm still not where I have to be. That's the archetype of the undeveloped self. The undeveloped self is, well, I think you could figure that out. It's the person that I am now, but I'm not as developed as I could be. And well, I explained that to you in the Darth Vader reference with Gotham, right? Gotham itself was an undeveloped self, and so was Darth Vader. Darth Vader, I said, you pull off the mask of Darth Vader, and it reveals this fetish-like, pale, wrinkly figure that is, well, we'll say, undeveloped, right? It looks actually like a fetus, and in doing that, you have this figure that is you, right? This figure that is embodied by your ego, but at the same time, it's literally just not the person it's meant to be. And, well, we go through that every single day. We experience our undeveloped self every single day, so long as we're doing it right. Because you can imagine we have about 1,000 personalities, and we'll go with 100 to make it super simple, and you have about 100 personalities, and every single one of them needs to develop alongside each other, right? You have this sort of conscience, right? We'll say the conscience is something that everyone understands, but the conscience actually develops as you grow older, I think, obviously. And, well, imagine you are a 50-year-old man with a 20-year-old conscience, right? It's like you're stuck with the undeveloped conscience, and there you have to go into a deep, well, struggle here. But Bruce is stuck with the undeveloped self, and obviously that's a little tough, right? And then you have that's the person that you are, and then you have the person that you want to be, right? And the person that you want to be is, well, we could say, yeah, or at least the person striving to be the person that you want to be. So it's like, when you really say you want to work out at the gym, so you get this, like, one night you get this, like, giant passion that just kind of, like, strikes you, and then you go and do push-ups on the floor and make a plan to go out to the gym and work out 2 hours a day, and say you're going to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning the next day to go to the gym, that sort of passion that comes within you, that is the example or the personality of the child hero, right? The child hero is, well, he's the symbol for naive ambition, right? Because you think about yourself as a child, as a child, you could do anything, and you had the passion and the ability to do anything. You could cure cancer. You could be the next Babe Ruth. You could literally pick something and say you could reach your potential to the highest degree, and it is possible, right? And well, the problem with that is that so many people fall along the way. But when you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to wake up 5 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, that's your child hero saying, wait a second, I could do anything. Wait a second, I could go to the gym for 2 hours a day and blah, 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 blah. Because I have this ability within me, and to some degree you are right? Like this hero within you actually exists. And, well, to further that idea, I really like one of the next scenes that comes up in the movie is this depiction of a child, right? So the depiction of a child, and you'll notice this, if you watch carefully, and I've started to take notice of this, in every single hero story, there's always a depiction of a child. Like, it always exists. Like, I'm trying to think of movies where the little child doesn't exist. Maybe Doctor Strange. But across almost all movies, you have this depiction of a child. And the reason behind the child is, well, to some degree we identify with Batman, right? To some degree we identify with the hero because we want to be the hero. But to an even higher degree, we identify with the child because, well, we could say that Batman is a lot higher than we are now, right? Because Batman obviously is, taking down criminals and has mastered his craft and has done 8 years worth of, fighting criminals and blah, 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 blah. So it's a little tough to identify with Batman, but it's a lot easier to identify with the child hero because the child hero comes up with the idea of, wait a second, I could be Batman, right? So if we identify with the child, which lies within us, right? The child that you ever walk out of a movie, and I actually walked out of this movie with it, and if you're particularly attentive, then you'll notice this. If you walk out of a good heroes movie that really gets you going, we'll say, you'll walk out of there with a newfound spirit for life, right? A newfound spirit to develop yourself. Like maybe after the movie you're going to set a new personal goal, or you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to start eating healthier tomorrow or something like that, because you see someone like Batman, you say, I could be him. That is the child hero within you. That's the child that says, hey, listen, maybe right now you are the undeveloped self. Maybe right now you are not the person that you could be. Because now that you've seen Batman, you compare yourself to Batman and you say, wait a second, I'm not him. So you say, your child hero comes out and says, maybe I could be him. And you go and set a goal. That's the naive hero within you. And Carl Jung would say, that literally throughout your entire life, you are a child. This child personality exists within you. You never get rid of it. And actually, he says one of the worst things that you can do is get rid of it, because, you imagine by the time that you hit around, like, we'll say 30, your life starts to stagnate. That's why actually, it's a funny stat. The most likely time for a person to go and run a marathon or run their first marathon is at the age of 29. And it's because they realize that their life is starting to stagnate. They realize that their life is starting to become mundane, and they're starting to lose the child within them, which obviously makes sense because, 30 is a rough age. And obviously it's the end of we'll say the young adult years. So in an effort to, we'll say, revivify the child, revivify that passion that exists within them, what they do is they go and they run a marathon. And that's the perfect representation, because they're literally saying, I could do anything, right? I have this ability to run 26.2 miles, even though maybe I didn't train that much, or maybe I haven't been training my whole life. All it really takes is 6 months worth of training, some decent genetics, and and, well, passion, which comes from the child hero. So, Jung argues that the child hero literally exists in us throughout our whole lives, and the problem with modern society is that we lose this child within us. We lose this child because, well, we lose this passion for life. We lose this ability to grow, or this desire to grow. And that's exactly what happened to Darth Vader. Darth Vader, from the years of, we'll say, well, that's a good representation, so we'll say like 25 or like 20. From the years of like 20 to the years of like 40, he died on the inside. Yeah, something like that. His child died on the inside, and well, he just fit in with the system, right? So all he did was instead of having the ambitions to grow himself and become better, literally all he did was, Darth Vader is a representation of greed, right? There's a quote in Star Wars, he's more man than machine, he's more machine than man now, right? So he's a symbol of the system, right? The evil system that exists, and well, he literally forgot this. He was more, when you say he was more machine than man, he was more of the system than a hero, right? He was more of the system than the person that exists within the system, and he lost his individuality. He lost the development, the ability to grow, the ability to develop, and the ability to see the child in himself. And then by the time that he becomes 40, right, and he saves Luke in episode 6, he rediscovers that child within himself, and that's, well, a fundamental archetype. So, we'll keep going, and we go back to this Anima figure. Now, the Anima figure is, I really like this idea. These ideas keep connecting. So what happens is you have this Anima figure who comes back, and she reminds him of himself in a way. So she says, so obviously she looked at him before, and she said, hey, listen, you are inadequate, right? Like, it's not the person that you are underneath, but it's what you do that defines you. So she's saying you are inadequate. The person that you want to be is, well, better than the person that you are now. And I think that's a great representation of the way that we act. There was a great quote that I saw. It was like a graffiti the other day. It was like, the smallest act of kindness is better than the grandest intention. And I really like that because, how many people intend to give to charity? How many people intend to, volunteer their time versus how many people actually do it? So I like the idea that, your actions represent who you are as opposed to your intentions. I like that idea. So that's sort of her representation of him, and what she does is she gives him this arrow, right? And I'll explain to you quickly what the arrow was. The arrow obviously was in the opening scene where Bruce and Rachel were fighting over the arrow, and well, it's an old arrow, right? So let's try to piece it together, right? So it's an old arrow that exists within the garden of the Wayne family, and we know that in the Wayne family, the Wayne family has owned that house for generations, right? And there was something that they were talking about freeing the slaves, right? Like in the 1800s, the Wayne family still had that house. And, everyone in the Wayne legacy, we'll say for the past, 5 generations, was a hero, right? Was a representation of Thomas Wayne, like a good Wayne family that represented the good Wayne legacy, that represented goodness, roughly, right? And therefore, this arrow, which can be found within the Wayne Garden, is a representation of that goodness, right? Of the Wayne legacy that still remains inside of Wayne Towers, right? And, I compared and said, yeah, we'll say compared. I compared the initial scene in the beginning of the movie with the scene of Adam and Eve, right? And if you remember, obviously, I think everyone knows the story of Adam and Eve. And the story of Adam and Eve, who was in the garden? It was the Bruce, which is obviously Adam, Rachel, which is obviously Eve, and then there was God, right? God was in there. And you could see God as a symbol of tradition. You could see God as a symbol of, we'll say, wisdom, right? And we could also see him as a symbol of goodness, right? And traditional goodness, right? The goodness from the past. And that's a symbol of this. That's exactly what this means, right? So this arrow was pretty much the representation of God, or the representation of Thomas Wayne, or the Wayne legacy within the Garden of Wayne instead of the Garden of Eden, right? So therefore, it's a symbol of goodness. It's a symbol of tradition, right? The goodness of the Wayne family. Now, you must ask the question, what does it mean that Rachel gives him this arrow? And, well, clearly it's a reminder, right? That's what it seems to me. It's a reminder. She's saying, hey, listen, buddy, you are dumb, right? You are stupid. You are not living the person that you could be, and you are, well, undeveloped. But through this arrow, through this, the Wayne legacy, you have Wayne within you, right? Thomas Wayne was a good man, and he passed on his lessons and obviously his genes down to you. Therefore, you can be a good person. You can be Thomas Wayne. And that's the reminder, right? That's the reminder, is that, obviously if we could say the arrow is a symbol for the Wayne legacy, her giving him the Wayne legacy is saying you could be Thomas Wayne, right? And you could be the person that you're meant to be, or the person that Thomas Wayne wanted you to be, or the person that you wanted to be when you were a kid. And, well, all of that is summed up in literally her giving him the arrow. And, so we say, obviously, there are all these personalities that exist. One of the personalities that exists in Bruce Wayne's world is his father, right? But we don't even get to see the father. This is the representation of the father right here. And, well, this is a fundamental archetype. I'm sure you remember in The Lion King. In The Lion King, what happens is, and obviously this is an archetype that comes from Hamlet, because Lion King is based on Hamlet. Simba falls from his path, and he descends into, we'll say, the Hakuna Matata mindset, which is, pleasure, no responsibilities, essentially this, right? Essentially Bruce Wayne being dumb. And so was Simba. Simba was being dumb. And his father comes to him in like a ghost-like figure and says, remember who you are my son and the one true king, right? And that's the same reminder, right? So this arrow is essentially Thomas Wayne coming down, or at least Rachel coming down and telling him, remember who you were, remember your father, remember that you are the son of your father, and that you have Thomas Wayne's blood within you. And, well, I mean, you could take that in your own life, right? Just the fact that you have goodness within you, right? You have, we'll say, the goodness of the past. So just think about, in your life, literally everything that you've learned that has been good. Every single thing that you've learned, therefore, has become a part of you, and therefore you could use it for good, but you just have to integrate it. You just have to make it part of your ego, and that's another personality that goes at war. And I really like that idea. I think that's a profound idea. You see that in God. How many movies does the father come back in the spirit of a ghost and speak to his son, right? That's Thor Ragnarok. That's Black Panther. That's The Lion King. Let's see if I could come on it with any more. Hamlet. Obviously, the Bible, where God comes down and reminds all the Jews, right? Like, essentially, you have forgotten me. We'll go with 5. Five's a good place. So yeah, that's pretty good. So then, what happens is then Batman becomes Batman, right? And we could say he's gone through that journey of integrating his father, and he becomes Batman, and now it's his job. He must encounter evil. So he encounters evil in the form of, what's his name? Dr. Crane, right? Dr. Crane is he's created this hallucinogenic, right? And the hallucinogenic essentially shows you your fears. So you can see Bruce Wayne's face, or Batman's face here, right? Really shocked, wasn't able to take it, was exposed to something that was above his ability to tolerate at that moment. And I think, I think we all go through that. You go to strive for a goal, super simple. You go to strive for a goal, and you realize that it's not as easy as you thought, right? It's not as easy as the child hero, the naive child hero who just says, okay, I'm just going to go to the gym at 5 o'clock every morning, thought it would be. And then your face sort of looks like that. Or we'll go to the next one. Your face maybe looks like that, You get the back-to-back, both of them were sprayed by the same thing, met the same beast, you could say, and got absolutely crushed. And, so here's a good time to explain the hallucinogenic. So the hallucinogenic, obviously, it shows you your fears, but we'll take that a little bit deeper. So Falcone gets sprayed, and he says Scarecrow, right? And I was very fond of this because Dr. Crane calls it a Jungian archetype, which it is. And let me explain to you what the Scarecrow is, because the Scarecrow is the representation of the hallucinogenic, right? So essentially what it is, what is a Scarecrow? A Scarecrow is something that people put in their farms, obviously, to scare away animals, because from a distance it looks scary. Or from a distance, it looks like something that can harm you, something to be feared. But at the same time, when you come up closer and you obviously see it up close, it's nothing to be feared. It's just irrational fear. It's something that we're afraid of, but we shouldn't be afraid of. And for Bruce Wayne, his Scarecrow, right, his irrational fear is bats, right? And obviously when he gets sprayed by Dr. Crane, he sees bats because, bats should not be feared, right? And he even proved this, right? He even proved this to himself when he goes into his own bat cave and gets swarmed by these bats and just sort of lets them swarm around him. And by doing that, he literally says, these bats can come up close to me, but they're not going to hurt me. I know that they're not going to hurt me. But at the same time, how many of us live in fear? That's the question. How many of us live in fear? Let me see if I could find a good example. Well, let's go with conformism, right? Conformism is something that every single one of us must deal with. And if you haven't dealt with it yet, then, that means you're conforming, right? And you have to deal with it essentially across all areas of your life. Because imagine you were actually, we'll give the example of we'll go with the first I'll give you the representation. So essentially, you're given this structure as a kid, right? And all these lessons that you have to learn from your parents. But a lot of the things that your parents tell you are wrong, right? A lot of the things that you learn from society are wrong, from your friends are wrong, from religion is wrong. And but we still use it anyways. There was this story that I heard that was actually somewhat disturbing, but I think it's a good representation. It was a father who, as a child, was sexually abused by his parents, and it was his dad. His dad abused his kid with, I don't even want to get into it, but brutal sexual abuse, and the child realized, right, this now father who was a child that got abused realized that it was wrong. And he knew that he shouldn't be doing it, but at the same time, he abused his kid in the same way. And he just kind of, there was the personality conflict. He believed that it was wrong, but at the same time, he thought that's just the way it is. And that's the representation of the Scarecrow, as someone who if you fear breaking away from the pack, if you fear breaking away from society, then you're just going to do what society has told you to do, which is essentially most of us. I mean, you imagine in our lives, there's this fundamental debate between should we be the person that people want us to be or should we be ourself? And, I would argue that sadly most people choose not to be themselves, and sadly people choose to be the person that people want them to be. They sort of adapt to the crowd, and they adapt to the rewards that society gives them, and, well, then you're never yourself. You essentially wear a mask, and that's obviously the symbol of the mask. Darth Vader, Bruce Wayne in this case, right? Bruce Wayne, we find this out later, obviously, but his mask is that, right? His mask is this stupid-looking, dumb face that that seems like a trust fund baby, right? And we all put on our mask, and, well, it's just a matter of whether or not you're strong enough to break away from the conformism, to break away of the fear of leaving the pack, or at least the fear of not conforming, because that's one of the biggest fears. There are two fears in life that could be obviously broken down into different subcategories. The first fear is death. The second fear is social humiliation. That's it, right? And every single fear, you think about the fear of public speaking, for example, that's obviously social humiliation. The fear of breaking away from the crowd, that's social humiliation. The fear of, obviously, a scarecrow would be the fear of death, right? And essentially every single one of these fears breaks away from these two ideas, and, well, conformism is just literally living in fear of people not accepting who you are. So, we do that essentially every single day. Now let's move on, and well, so there's this so what happens is Bruce Wayne goes down, or Batman goes down into the depths, right, and he experiences, he finds Scarecrow, right, and he finds essentially what they've been doing, and he realizes that he has to save Rachel, because Rachel's essentially doing something that a naive child would do, and she's just kind of like saying, all right, I'm just going to take my DA, right, my boss is dead, and let me just kind of go into it and just sort of figure it out, which I thought was kind of stupid. But anyways, what happens is Batman comes in, he sort of swoops in, and, well, I really like this idea. So he gets chased by the cops, right? And this is a theme that goes throughout the entire I think it's all three movies. I know it's definitely the first two. So he gets chased by the people that are operating in the same exact, we'll say, way as he is, or at least who have the same goals as he is, right? So Batman is a symbol for good, right? The cops are also a symbol for good. They're a symbol for, obviously they want what's best for society, or at least, in theory, right? And, well, at least that's something I believe. And it's kind of messed up how he literally gets chased by the cops all the time. And I love how all these ideas are connecting, right? I just brought to you the idea of conformism. What is the representation of the police? The representation of the police in this movie, the personality that's represented, is conformism. It's order. It's complete order that the society gives you, but at the same time, it's bad order. It's the order that is somewhat tyrannical because it, well, tries to chase away the hero part of you, and that's exactly these personalities in conflict. So you have the personality of Batman, right? The hero who breaks society's rules and doesn't want to conform, right? Doesn't want to operate within the police system that has failed. But then you have the police system that is the representation of, society, the representation of order, the representation of every single thing, all the rules that you've been given, and essentially when the police try to catch him, it's a representation of, hey, listen, conform. Hey, listen, us cops, we got it figured out. Even though we don't have it figured out, we have it figured out. I don't want you going and solving problems. And that's the fear that exists within us. So, let's see if there's anything else that I got in here. So yeah, I just sort of said the personalities in conflict. It's security versus adventurism, right? Security is, hey, listen, even though this police system is bad, it's secure, right? It's order, right? It's, we're not throwing any wrenches in there. Versus adventurism, which is obviously Batman, who says, hey, listen, this system's messed up. Maybe we should fix it. And I've sort of figured that out throughout my own life. I mean, listen, I've gone through so many struggles of, the things that I've learned, trying to unpack them. One of the ladies I had on my podcast, her name was Nikki Groom, and she goes, one of the most important things that any person can do is unlearn. Unlearning is the process of taking all the things that you've learned and realizing that some of them, obviously not all of them, are messed up. And obviously that's, so that's we'll say the good things that he's learned is the representation of Thomas Wayne, and the bad things that he's learned is the representation of, this faulty, corrupt police system. And, well, you need to sort of parcel out between the two, and that's the process of unlearning. You can't just completely say, hey, listen, I hate this, right? I hate this. And Jung says there are two types of father complexes, and both of these are bad, and obviously there's a good middle. So the first bad father complex is somebody who loved their father so much that they never broke away from them, right? That they never said, wait a second, maybe some of the things that he said are wrong, and therefore they have this blind trusting of authority, right? Which is representation of someone who conforms. But then you have the second type of father complex of somebody who rejects any form of authority, which obviously is the opposite, and well, that's also pretty bad, right? That's also that's what Bruce Wayne was in the beginning. That was his representation when he wanted to kill Joe Chill, right? This representation here, when he had his little pistol here, because he's essentially saying Thomas Wayne was good, and he says, I'm not one of your people, Rachel. So, I like it. So the answer is balance, right? So obviously he's working for the good. So he's got the Thomas Wayne within him, but at the same time, he is not just conforming to the awful system, and he's not listening to the police. He's actually operating separately from the police, and that's the personality within him, the personality conflict. So I also like the idea. So what happens is, I don't know if they did this on purpose, but you know what? I'll go with it. So to run away from the police, he must break away from the established order, right? Because that's what security is. You got to break away from the security. And what does he do as he's running away from the police? He starts breaking rooftops. Not out of malice, not out of, evil, but out of necessity. To break away from the system, he needs to, cause a little bit of chaos. Imagine going up to your father, which in this case is, the two opposites of the father complex, and breaking away from the first father complex, which is the blind trusting of authority. And one day you have to go up to him and you have to say, hey, listen, everything that you say is not correct. Right? Like, there are some things, like, I need a little individuality here, and I need to go in and say, hey, listen, I'm my own person. You might have a belief, but at the same time, we don't have the same belief systems, and, maybe some of your things aren't wrong. Maybe every single thing that you say is right, but everything that you say is right for you, right? Since we're two different people, some of the things that you say that are right for you are not the same that are right for me. And by doing that, you establish a little bit of chaos. You're throwing off the established order, and that is a representation of breaking away from the system, of going on rooftops and destroying them, right? So that's what happens when you don't conform. When you don't conform, when you become, we'll say, a disagreeable hero, which is a good thing, which could be a good thing, then you're going to break away from the established order. That's just going to happen. And I wrote a whole chapter in my book about what happens, as the final chapter, where I literally say, whenever you decide to do something that is good for you, most likely you're going to experience some sort of backlash. Most likely you're going to experience some sort of, conformist behavior on other people. If you have people that are really real with you and people that are really honest with you, they're going to come up to you and they're going to say, hey, listen, either I don't believe that you can do it, why are you doing something that's so dumb, or more of like, why are you being crazy? And I mean, maybe some of it is true. And I think it's also really good for people to say that to you because, you get an understanding of what people are thinking. But At the same time, it's your job to say to them, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing, this is me, and you might live in a world, I live in a different world, and you might have your reality, I have my reality too, and maybe you're right, and maybe I'm also right, or maybe you're wrong, but obviously maybe you don't have to say that. Maybe you do say that, and you just literally say, I'm me, I'm sticking to my guns, and that's my decision. And that is throwing off the established order. That is running across houses. So then we get through this entire struggle. Bruce Wayne eventually makes it back to the party, and he becomes Bruce Wayne again. This is maybe my favorite image in the entire movie, right here. He walks into the party, and this just shows how good of an actor he is. So this is his 30th birthday party, and he's coming in as Bruce Wayne. How miserable is his face here? How miserable is his face? This is the fakest smile I've ever seen in my entire life, and he does it right. Because, well, you'll see, right? Obviously, you know what ends up happening. He doesn't want to be at this party, right? He wants everybody to get out, and he wants everybody to, well, leave, right? And partially it's because, in the case of the movie, right, it's because obviously there is evil that exists within his house, and he doesn't want people to see the evil. But first, before we go there, I want to talk about the most serious debate that happens within this entire movie. And it's the debate between the conscience and the ego, right? The conscience and the adventurer, because Batman in this time is representing the adventurer. So Alfred stands here. So first of all, Bruce Wayne says, hey, listen, there's evil that's in my house right now. People are going to get hurt if I don't leave. And he says, if they don't leave. And the only thing that I can do is that I need to kick everybody out of my house. I need to destroy the Wayne legacy to do this. And I need to essentially rudely tell them to leave, right? Because, how else are you going to kick somebody out of your house, right? I think that's about right. I mean, it fits with the storyline. And, well, the conscience, right? Which is, you could say it's the good, it could even be the good angel sitting on your shoulder. And Batman might even be following the devil. If you want to look at it from this, what's the word? With just with only two lenses with a white or black view instead of, the fact that there's some gray area in here. Alfred says, hey, listen, why would you want to destroy the Wayne legacy? Why would you want to get rid of everything that your family has built up over the years? It doesn't make sense. And, well, this is a scary moment because what happens is Bruce Wayne actually separates from his conscience and doesn't follow his conscience. And while we normally believe, we normally think that following your conscience, following your heart is... No, we'll just say following your conscience. Your heart's a different thing. Following your conscience is the best thing to do, right? But at the same time, it actually seems like it was the right decision for him not to follow his conscience. And God, I don't know how to interpret that. I don't know how to interpret that because... Well, you could think of it in Pinocchio. So in Pinocchio, you have the conscience, and it's Jiminy Cricket, right? This obviously little bug, little cricket. And Pinocchio is about to go into the depths and save his father. He's about to go and go into the belly of the whale, take a huge risk, you could say. And Jiminy Cricket, as Pinocchio, is tying himself to a rock, which is going to take him down into the bottom of the ocean. Jiminy Cricket is telling him why he shouldn't do it. He's arguing with him, but at the same time, he's also helping him tie the rock to himself. And it's a good representation of the conscience. Even in that case, was confused, right? The conscience didn't really know how to do it, and well, that's one aspect of the conscience. The conscience was arguing with him, and that's exactly what happens here. You have the conscience arguing with Bruce, and this is the definition of a moral dilemma. So a moral dilemma is when one moral versus another moral come up against each other, and both cannot win. One literally needs to beat out another, and that's exactly what happens inside of you. Like, life would be so much easier if we had a situation where literally every single answer didn't require a personal sacrifice, or every single answer didn't require one part of yourself to lose. But, well, the director, in this case Christopher Nolan, did an amazing job, and this is what an amazing director does, because it simulates real life. He puts Batman in a situation, or at least Bruce Wayne in this case, in a place where one of his personalities needs to die, or one of his personalities needs to lose. And, well, that's what you're faced with in real life. I say, hey, listen, this is the greatest example. I place a cookie in front of you, okay? And the question is, what do you do, right? Automatically, the second I place that cookie in front of you, and maybe I'll walk away so you don't have to deal with the social pressure. Because typically if I ask you for a cookie, right, I said, hey, do you want a cookie? You'll say no out of politeness. But if I said, hey, you want a cookie? And then I walk away, sort of like the marshmallow test, which is tested on little kids, then you have, then it's a lot tougher of a decision, So I place a cookie in front of you and I walk away. There are two personalities that are at stake. There's the, we'll say, the pleasure-driven animal versus the health-conscious ego, you could say. We'll go with that. And, well, that's the angel and the devil, right? Like, that's the simplest representation of the angel and devil. And, well, it's your call, right? One of them has to lose, right? One of them has to lose in every single situation. It's not like you could just have half a cookie, because if you have half a cookie, then the pleasurable monster wins. And then, it's a funny thing that happens with food. The funny thing that happens with food is you have, there was a great quote that my friend Brian told me. He said, it's easier to spend 15 minutes on Twitter. No. It's easier to spend only 15 minutes. It's easier to spend 0 minutes on Twitter than only 15 minutes on Twitter. That was correct. And the reason is because whenever you spend 15 minutes on Twitter, then you end up spending, 30 minutes on Twitter and 45. So it's easier to spend 0 minutes on Twitter. It's easier to access that part of your personality to just say, no, I'm good. Instead of accessing the pleasure animal-driven personality and then trying to pull them back. It's like, it's really not that easy. The thing that I said in front of my family, which really summed up this point, I said, hey, listen, we were just having a hypothetical conversation. I say, is it easier to have only one M&M or to have 0 M&Ms? And we all came to an unanimous agreement. It's easier to have 0 M&Ms, to just say no right off the bat. And, well, it just shows that in every single scenario, you place yourself in that moral dilemma. Let's say one person's going to lose. One person's going to lose. If you have half the cookie, you lost. You essentially lost. And, or your hero lost, right? We'll say. Your conscience, your ego lost. And, well, that's why when you go on almost any health weight loss website, what they will tell you almost unanimously is when you go to the store, that is where the battle is won and lost. It is not when it's in your house. Once you, we'll say, buy chocolate, right? If you leave the chocolate out in your house, no matter what, that will be eaten. That will be eaten. It doesn't matter, because the problem is you have these conflicts that go against each other. And the problem is that this conflict of just saying, hey, listen, do I want the cookie or do I want to resist the cookie? That in and of itself takes up a lot of energy. And, well, if you're sitting there and there's chocolate always sitting next to you while you're working, or always in the kitchen while you're working, or always just a few rooms down and it's in the back of your head and you know it's there, then you might win the first battle, right? You might win the first battle of, okay, you know what? I'm not going to go with the chocolate chip cookie. But after a while, eventually you're just going to cave. You're just going to cave. And that's why they say you win at the grocery store, because it's a lot harder you'd have to access a lot stronger of a personality to drive to the grocery store, get the chocolate, pay for the chocolate, and then eat it, right? As opposed to literally just sitting there and you eating it. So, there are ways around it. There's a great way of avoiding these moral conflicts, and that's part of what we do in our daily lives. It's really draining to go through these personal conflicts. So one of the best things that we humans do is just avoid them, right? If you Jordan Peterson, he goes, if you don't want to get mauled by a biker gang, don't go into a biker bar, right? And I think it's just a common sense thing that we do, So to avoid, the moral conflict of, let's say, eating this chocolate bar, then you're literally just don't buy the chocolate bar, right? It's just the simplest thing. But eventually, the truth is, eventually you're going to run into one of these conflicts, and one of your personalities is going to have to lose. And hey, listen, Batman or Bruce Wayne gets into this argument with Alfred, and you could easily make the case that Alfred was right. You could easily make the case. But one of the best things about a hero is decisive. You look at someone like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, and he is the most decisive character that you've ever seen. Like, no matter what, he is essentially training his decisiveness muscles. And no matter what, he makes a choice, and he runs with it. And he's constantly testing like an engineer, because obviously he's an engineer. And well, hopefully after a while, after all those decisions, you eventually store up enough data to say, okay, wait, maybe I start to make the right decisions after a while. So, we could argue that Batman makes the right decision. So Bruce Wayne, so he goes in here, gives us a little fake smile, and, it shows how little he cares about the people at the party, which really shows how little he cares about this personality of himself. He really cares very little about upholding the playboy billionaire trust fund baby, So then he kicks him out, and he says, Ducard comes back and obviously reveals himself as Ra's al Ghul, and it's a tough understanding of this personality. So, obviously I've been trying to extract every single personality that really comes in here, and it's really funny because, okay, I'll take you through the full analysis. So exactly what happens is, when you think of a villain, right, you think of, like, the evil character who is driven by a thirst for evil, right? You think of someone like Voldemort. You think of someone like Satan. You think of someone like Scar. You think of someone like, let's even use, like, The Incredibles, right? Someone like, what was The Incredibles villain? Syndrome, right? Incredibles was a huge movie, and his only desire was revenge. His only desire was to just make the Incredibles suffer. And I find that type of villain to be kind of like a cop-out. I find it to be kind of a cop-out, because you would imagine all of the negative or the evilness that lies within you. The one that's most blatant is that type of villain, right? The one that's most blatant is the type that, we'll say, wants to do harm to other people only because it feels bitter and resentful and wants to do harm. That's the least arguable one. That's the same pathology that leads to someone shooting up a school, for example, right? If someone's shooting up a school, says, I want to do as much harm as I can to other people. That's their only pathology, even if it hurts myself, right? And, obviously that's why they do harm to people first before they kill themselves, right? And that's just the simplest, that's the easiest villain to beat within you, we could say, or at least the least controversial. But then you look at someone like Ducard, and someone like Ducard is composed, he's rational, he's focused, he's a good mentor, and his goal is balance and harmony, right? His goal is to be able to bring balance back to life, we could say, or at least balance to Gotham. And, wasn't that the goal of the Jedis, right? Wasn't the goal of the Jedis balance? Wasn't the goal of Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid? Wasn't his goal balance too? Isn't that such a noble thing to strive for? But he's our villain, right? And he's our villain, and I've spent a lot of time trying to grapple with this, and I really came to the conclusion that if this movie was made in the perspective of Ducard, or obviously Ra's al Ghul, you could paint this movie with Ra's al Ghul, Ducard as the hero. Easily. Same backstory as Bruce, goes through the same amount of trauma, and he says, hey, listen, we should kill our villains, right? We should kill the people that have wronged us, right? And who could argue with that, right? Who could argue with that? That's Harry Potter, right? That's whatever. That's the Lion King. That's every single piece of mythology that is existed before, we'll say probably like the 1980s, right? Like that's such a strong mythological piece where you should kill your enemies. And obviously Batman, that's the way that we know Batman, as in we don't kill him. We don't kill our villains. We sort of, I guess, trust them. We show a little bit more compassion. And, well, if you're trying to figure out exactly what the personality behind Ducard is, it's the vengeance personality who will do everything necessary to achieve an end goal. I would say that's what it is, because you look at Ducard. Ducard is a very similar character to Thanos. Like, really, really similar. Rational, does everything out of an altruistic purpose, right? He doesn't do it for any self-interest whatsoever. He does it because he believes that this is going to be what's best for Gotham, as well as Thanos believed this is what's best for the people on Earth. And, well, that's why it makes it so difficult, but the difference you could see between Bruce and Ducard is that Bruce wants to show compassion, and he wants to essentially, we'll say, give sympathy to his villains, right? He wants to give them compassion. He wants to understand them, right? He does the same thing with the Joker, and he did the same thing with Ducard when he saved him. He gave him the opportunity to live and to maybe redeem himself, right? Like, that's what our prison system is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about redeeming yourself and rehabilitation, right? But Ducard is all about retribution. Ducard is all about clean, swift order. And maybe that's what's bad about him. The type that's not willing to endure chaos. The type that's not willing to endure the ugly process of rehabilitation, the ugly process of change, right? Because, you would imagine the process of change within you is maybe the most difficult process, right? It's ugly. It's really, really ugly. Like, imagine you want to go to the gym and you obviously believe, hey, listen, 2 weeks, the child hero within you is saying, 2 weeks, I get this done, I figure it out, no problem, end of story, done. But really, that process is a 6-month process, maybe a year process. Probably, really, if we're gonna talk about it in terms of the full scale, it's a lifelong process of saying, you are constantly living in chaos. You are constantly trying to undergo changes within yourself to reap the positive benefit. That's exactly what a hero's journey is. And Ducard says, maybe we shouldn't have these. This is maybe the cynic personality that exists within you, and obviously there's going to be some personality conflict there. And my personality conflict that I wrote down here was vengeance versus compassion. And I like that because that is the old school hero versus the new school hero. The question is, which one should it be? Should it be the old school hero who essentially says, let's just kill our villains. Let's just kill our villains. And that is essentially the establishment of the consciousness being triumphant over the unconscious, But I think that's somewhat shallow, or at least it needs too much digging past. I like the idea of compassion, of sort of, I guess hopefully integrating the evil within you. Batman's goal throughout this whole thing is taking this villain who's Ducard and really saying, hey, listen, I'm going to save you. I'm literally going to save you. And hopefully maybe you could, hopefully maybe my compassion turns out in a better way. So he does that, and in this case, we're faced with another moral dilemma. Batman has shown his compassion. Bruce Wayne has done everything in his power to be compassionate, but yet Ducard makes the city go crazy. He makes the city go crazy, releases this hallucinogenic, so he essentially exposes everybody to their Scarecrow. He exposes everybody to the worst fear. And the real meaning behind this is, I kind of like this. What he's really saying is, if I release this hallucinogenic, if I release the truth, truth is a good way of saying it, because the truth is that these people, the mass amount of people, do not try to integrate their fears, right? They don't do what Batman did because it's tough, right? This is not an easy process. And to imagine that it is an easy process is somewhat naive. You imagine, well, hopefully throughout this whole process, you figured out something that you feared, because, well, I think everybody lives in fear to some degree. And we haven't confronted it for whatever reason. And what Ducard is simply saying is, let's see what happens when we confront them with their fears. And this is the negative shadow. This is the representation of somebody who's going on a hero's journey who wasn't ready for it. That's like going up to somebody and saying, hey, listen, you're fat and you need to fix yourself. Instead of what do you expect someone to do during that? It's such a, even if they are fat, right? Like they need to come to that realization themselves. Essentially what you're doing in this case is you're saying you are unworthy, and maybe there's some sort of implication that you can't be accepted into my social group by saying that. And well, the problem is you're hitting someone where they're unprepared, right? Obviously they have no idea that it's going to come, or at least it seems so. And right away, they're hit with this fear, panic, it's a good way of saying it. But once the hero becomes ready, once the hero accepts it themselves, then you have, well, you don't have this sort of mass panic within them, and it makes life a lot easier for them. That's why, for example, you try to say, you should never go up to someone and say, help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. I think that's the reason behind it. It's because you're literally causing someone to face something that they weren't even ready to face. Maybe they were too naive to face it, or maybe their ego was just blocking it off. But by forcing it upon them is essentially like, well, it's the same concept as taking a little child who is incredibly naive, right? Because obviously children are incredibly naive, and exposing them to trauma right away, right? Some sudden trauma. And it was this girl, Nicole Spindler, on my podcast. She said, 15 years old, completely healthy, completely normal, no trauma in her life, completely naive as a result, and one day she wakes up, her dad has cancer, right? And what do? This happens, right? Chaos, trauma, your brain has no idea how to handle it, and you were never equipped with the means to handle it because you were naive. And as a result, she developed PTSD, she developed anxiety, she developed depression. And, well, you get with other complications in her life too, and that's what happens, She was exposed to the thing that she most feared, and she wasn't ready to handle it. And, well, that's what you see if you confront somebody who hasn't confronted it themselves. It's like they literally weren't able to handle it. And in this depiction, you literally have someone crushing a man crushing another person's skull, and that's obviously the violence that ensues, right? That's the internal violence that ensues when you decide that you're going to, well, confront something that you're not ready to handle. So then you have he burns down Wayne Manor. I think it's called Wayne Manor. Burns down Wayne Manor and breaks the train, which obviously eventually happens. And this is another representation of the chaos that ensues. It's like, when such a figure like Ducard comes in and just wrecks you, right? Just comes in, and we could say maybe Batman wasn't really prepared for it, because it doesn't really seem like he was prepared for it the whole time. And well, you have this panic that exists, and then you also have the tearing down of order, right? Because Wayne Manor is the representation of order, of tradition, of goodness that exists within the Wayne legacy. And, well, the tearing down of the train and the burning down of the house is literally the representation of once you lose your structure, once you lose the whatever it was that was holding you up. Because you imagine, when you see the fears that come and grip you in this way, it's almost as if the floor has pulled out from under you and you're falling, right? That's the chaos that ensues. And when you're in such a chaotic state, when you lose all your structure, then everything burns down. Every single thing that has been holding you up for a little bit, and you could argue that maybe the thing that has been holding you up is somewhat fragile because, well, you could see that in your typical college student, you could say. Maybe they have no idea what they're going to do with their career, and maybe they have like 5 bad habits that they really don't want to confront, and maybe they have some shitty friends that they really don't want to work on, like really don't want to, we'll say, expand out of their bubble, and maybe their grades aren't too good, and maybe they're struggling with this and that, but they have a decent level of friends and maybe some alcohol to keep them happy. Like that's the floor that's really holding them up, and then all you got to do is pull that out, and they're exposed to the 5 things, the 5 habits, along with the other 10 things that they were really, well, unable to confront before. And, well, that's chaos, right? That's the mass chaos that exists within your society. That's the burning down of the tradition, the structure that you once had, and that's also the burning down, the getting rid of the train, because you literally have no ground to stand on. And Jordan Peterson said, he goes, in my clinical experience, most people who come to me are not people who have anxiety or depression. Anxiety or depression, or at least is not the cause of it. What happens is people's lives are just so damn complex. They're so chaotic. There are so many variables moving in so many places that they literally just can't handle it. And they come in, and the only purpose of them coming in is, well, because they developed anxiety and depression from not being able to handle it, from not being able to sort out, okay, this thing went wrong. Why did it go wrong? What exactly was it that I could have done to fix it so it doesn't happen again? And they have no idea to sort that out. And when you come into therapy, that's exactly what you do. You literally just come and sort out all the things that happen in your life. And, well, if we're going to talk in the Batman sense, maybe you rebuild, maybe your house was on fire, but you rebuild the house, and maybe your city was going crazy, but you help them out a little bit. And maybe your train fell apart, but you rebuild that. And that process is really the establishment of order within chaos. So that's a good way of saying it. Then we move on. We have essentially like the atonement with the Anima, kind of, right? It's just a good feel-good moment where Rachel realizes that Bruce is Batman, says, it's not what I am. It's not what I believe to be, but what I do that defines me. Is that what it is? I'm sorry, my memory's terrible. It's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you, right? This is the point where obviously Rachel understands, all right, wait a second, this is Bruce. Go back a little further, and, well, we have the whole battle scene, right? Like, you don't have that many mythological archetypes that exist in battle scenes. It's just you fight. And one of the things that I really liked was, I was watching the director's cut, and the director said, he said, we wanted to make sure that Batman and Ducard or Ra's al Ghul were fighting on somewhat of an equal scale. And I like that idea because, well, it's not like Batman is proven to be anything better than Ducard. Like, Ducard is really, really solid. So they get into this fight, and, well, here we get into a moral dilemma, and I don't really want to go into it because, well, people have written books on this. People have written just tremendously long articles and have given so much thought on this, which I don't really want to smear their ideas with just one simple view. But he says, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. And then he just kills him, right? Essentially, it's the same. It seems like it's the same thing as killing him by establishing a plan that's going to kill him, or just stabbing him in the heart, right? There's very little difference in my understanding. But one of the moral principles that I guess you could take from this is that Batman gave Ra's al Ghul his chance, right? He gave him his chance. He saved him once. Maybe he's going to say, "I'm not going to save you again," right? And that's maybe the moral dilemma that eventually comes in through it. You say, "Okay, I want to give people compassion, but not to too much of a degree. I want to put up with the chaos of hopefully people changing themselves, but at the same time, it's like you only get so many chances. So maybe that's it. That's a tough way of looking at it. So, here's the aftermath. You find out, obviously there's backlash on Bruce, right? Because, well, that's the good part about a moral dilemma, and I think they really did a good job of here. They paint Bruce as a drunken billionaire who kicked all the people out of his house, and that's about right, because when you make a sacrifice, when you sacrifice one of these aspects of your personality, which is, in this case, hey, listen, he sacrificed the, we'll say, pleasure animalistic driven drive of his. Well, you're going to experience a backlash. You're going to experience a backlash because that's exactly what sacrifice is. So he experiences a backlash. Sounds about right to me. And then we have the atonements, right? I really like the idea of atonement. Hopefully, at the end, whenever you do everything, I actually like that. In the background, you have Marcus Aurelius, right? I'm going to point to it right over here. This is a statue of Marcus Aurelius, which is the good king, right? Marcus Aurelius is maybe one of the greatest kings of all time. And, well, I like how they have that in Wayne Legacy because it's essentially the same thing as the arrow, right? To show that, this is in Wayne Towers. And it kind of proves that, Wayne still lives on, right? The good king, Marcus Aurelius, still lives on. So, never noticed that, but I like that. But anyways, he makes Fox the CEO, right? Because, well, that was Mr. Fox's problem in the beginning. Mr. Fox had no power, right? So, what he's doing here is he's giving him power, right? Because the ego, right? Bruce Wayne is the one, he's the only one, obviously, if we're saying this is his world, he's the only one who could give Mr. Fox power, and he does, right? With Alfred, there was a little, I should have put this before, but anyways, you have, there's this little atonement with the conscience. So after the house burns down, you have, the conscience comes and speaks to Bruce Wayne, who's defeated, right? He's absolutely defeated because his house just got burnt down and the city's in mass distress, and essentially the floor was pulled out from under him. But what happens is the conscience comes and speaks to him. The maybe we'll say the figure of, well, sounds like someone. No, I like the conscience because he says something that his dad said before in the past, which was, "What do you do when you fall down? You get back up," or something like that. And well, that's his father speaking to him, right? It's not only the atonement with the conscience, which obviously there was some problem between Alfred and Bruce before, but at the same time you have the atonement with the father, who you realize that Bruce Wayne still remembers the lessons that his father told him. So you have that. You have the atonement with we could go back to here. You have the atonement with the father again, which is he decides to rebuild Wayne Manor brick for brick, the way he says it, right? He's gonna build Wayne Manor brick for brick, and that's good because that means he respects the tradition, right? He respects the Wayne legacy and he respects the good lessons that his father gave him, but at the same time he's also adding a little bit of improvements in what they say the Southwest Wing. And well, that's the perfect archetype, right? Because you could say Thomas Wayne had some flaws, and the problem with Thomas Wayne was that maybe he wasn't adequate enough to stop Falcone, and he wasn't adequate enough to stop Joe Chill, right? Or the mass crime that existed underneath the city. And well, the fact that Bruce Wayne is respecting the legacy of the Wayne Manor, but at the same time is adding in a little bit more, says that he's going to improve on the parts that his father was ignorant about. And that's really, that's hopefully the goal of humans, right? Hopefully the goal is you think of your parents, you think of, society, you think of culture as something that is good because it gives you structure, it gives you a base, it gives you something to do when you're a kid and you have no idea what you're doing in the world. But at the same time, it's somewhat tyrannical because, well, it's somewhat wrong, right? Every single culture that's ever existed is somewhat wrong, and even if it was right at the time, even if it was perfect at the time, maybe times have changed, right? Maybe people have changed. Maybe there's some fundamental difference that has changed, and maybe the culture that existed 100 years ago is not the culture that should exist today. So, well, that's sort of the meaning of Thomas Wayne dying, right? Thomas Wayne dying is showing that the culture of the past is dead, and there's a new man in town, you could say, and he needs to adjust the culture to the times, and that's why we always need to have politicians, right? That's why politicians always need to exist, and why we always need to be making laws, because if we don't always make laws, then we're not adjusting to the times, and we're decaying. So it's good, right? That's the meaning of the circle of life. The circle of life is, in Lion King, constant progression, year over year, generation over generation, and hopefully by the end you have a fully progressed society. And that's the meaning of adding an addition to Wayne Tower, but also respecting Wayne Tower itself. Then we have an atonement with Jim Gordon, right, where Jim Gordon says thank you, and Batman says you'll never have to. Obviously, it shows that Batman's doing it for a little altruistic reason. And finally, we have the atonement with the Anima, which is a little bit, it's an interesting concept, right, because, well, she's the one who says, this is your mask, right, like the drunken billionaire is your mask, which I really like, but it's not a full atonement because, well, you see that Bruce integrates the compassion inside of himself, but at the same time, it's really, really difficult because, well, she kind of leaves him on the hook. She definitely leaves him on the hook. So, well, that's something to be explored in The Dark Knight, which I will definitely be making a video on, and which hopefully should be here soon. But anyways,